Let's recap the beginning of creation and the evolution of the mind-body-spirit complex. Free will of awareness finds focus. This focus is known to us as logos or love. The logos creates light. The light condenses into matter, creating the physical universes. The evolution of the mind-body-spirit complex is as previously described, the consciousness being first, in first density, without movement, a random thing. Whether you may call this mind or body complex is a semantic problem. We call it mind-body complex, recognizing always that in the simplest iota of this complex exists in its entirety the one infinite creator. Then this mind-body complex in the second density, discovering the growing and turning towards the light, thus awakening the spirit complex, that which intensifies the upward spiraling towards the love and light of the infinite creator. Let's define three components of the mind-body-spirit complex separately. These terms are all simplistic descriptive terms which equal a complex of energy focuses. The body is the material of the density which we experience at a given physical or metaphysical dimension. This complex of materials is available for concepts of what we would call physical manifestation. The mind is a complex, which reflects the inpourings of the spirit and the outpourings of the body complex. It contains what we know as feelings, emotions, and intellectual thoughts in its more conscious complexities. Moving further down the tree of mind, we see the intuition, which is of the nature of the mind, more in contact or in tune with the total beingness complex. Moving down to the roots of mind, we find the progression of consciousness, which gradually turns from the personal to the racial memory to the cosmic influxes, and thus becomes a direct contactor of that shuttle which is called the spirit complex. The spirit complex is the channel whereby the inpourings from all of the various universal, planetary, and personal inpourings may be funneled into the roots of consciousness, and whereby consciousness may be funneled to the gateway of intelligent infinity through the balanced intelligent energy of body and mind. You will see by this series of definitive statements that mind, body, and spirit are inextricably intertwined and cannot continue, one without the other. Thus we refer to the mind-body-spirit complex rather than attempting to deal with them separately, for the work that we do during our experiences is done through the interaction of these three components, not through any one. As the space-time of a planetary system enables a second-density planetary sphere to spiral into the third-density vibratory environment, the third-density cycle begins and lasts approximately 76,000 years on any planet. There are three major cycles of approximately 20,000 years in this master cycle. There is one necessity for a physical complex to be suitable for lessons of the third density. That necessity is self-awareness, or self-consciousness. In order to be capable of such, this chemical complex of the body must be capable of abstract thought. Thus, the fundamental necessity is the combination of rational and intuitive thinking. The third density mind was capable of processing information in such a way as to think abstractly and in what could be termed useless ways, in the sense of survival. This is the primary requisite. There are other important ingredients. The necessity for a weaker physical vehicle to encourage the use of the mind, the development of the already present awareness of the social complex, the further development of physical dexterity in the sense of the hand, also being necessary. The third density entity is self-sufficient only through difficulty and deprivation. It is difficult to learn alone, for there is a built-in handicap, at once the great virtue and the great handicap of third density. That is the rational, intuitive mind. Thus, the weakening of the physical vehicle was designed to distort entities towards a predisposition to deal with each other. Thus, the lessons which approach a knowing of love can be begun. This catalyst then is shared between peoples as an important part of each self's development, as well as the experiences of the self in solitude and the synthesis of all experience through meditation. The quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. Dealing with the self without other selves is akin to living without mirrors. Thus, the self cannot see the fruits of its beingness. Thus, each may aid each by reflection. This is also a primary reason for the weakening of the physical vehicle, as we call the physical complex. Within the third density, it is necessary to build destruction of the physical vehicle into its design, for the spirit complex is not experienced as a shuttle that it is not aware of the appropriate degree of intensity of learning and increment of lessons. Therefore, not to build into the physical vehicle its ending would be counterproductive to the mind-body-spirit complexes therein residing. For within the illusion, it seems more lovely to be within the illusion than to drop the garment which has carried the mind-body-spirit complex and move on. Thus, the physical body goes through the aging process that leads to the removal from the third density incarnation of the mind-body-spirit complex. The optimal incarnative period of the third density entity in the physical body is somewhere close to a measure we call a millennium. This is, as we may say, a constant regardless of other factors of the third density experience. There is a particular use for this optimal span of life in this density. The mind-body-spirit complex of third density has perhaps 100 times as intensive a program of catalytic action from which to distill understandings and learnings than any other of the densities. Thus, the learning and teachings are most confusing to the mind-body-spirit complex, which is, shall we say, inundated by the ocean of experience. During the first, shall we say, perhaps 150 to 200 years as we measure time, a mind-body-spirit complex is going through the process of a spiritual childhood. The mind and the body are not enough in a disciplined configuration to lend clarity to the spiritual influxes. Thus, the remaining time span is given to optimize the understandings which result from experience itself. At the beginning of our third density space-time continuum, the average lifespan was approximately 900 years. The lifespan of the physical complex would remain the same throughout the cycle, given the harmonious development of the learnings and teachings of this density. However, our particular planetary sphere developed an inharmonious relational vibration between other selves by the second major cycle, which shortened the lifespan dramatically. In the first cycle, this was not severe due to the dispersion of peoples, but there was the growing feeling towards division or separateness from other selves. Upon our planetary sphere, the third density cycle began nearly 76,000 years ago. There were among those, upon this second density plane, those forms which, when exposed to third density vibrations, became the third density entities, as we would call human beings. That is, there was loss of the body hair, the clothing of the body to protect it, the changing of the structure of the neck, jaw, and forehead in order to allow the easier vocalization and the larger cranial development characteristic of third density needs. This was a normal transfiguration and took approximately 1,350 years, or at least within a generation and a half, as we know these things. Those second density mind-body complexes who graduated on this planet were able to use the newly created physical complex of chemical elements suitable for the third density lessons. At the beginning of the third density, the incarnation pattern of the beginning third density entity begins in darkness. You may consider our density as one of a sleep and a forgetting. The third density is the only plane of forgetting. It is necessary for the third density entity to forget, so that the mechanisms of free will may operate upon the newly individuated consciousness complex. Thus, the beginning entity is one in all innocence, oriented towards animalistic behavior, using other selves only as extensions of self for the preservation of the all-self. The entity becomes slowly aware that it has needs, shall we say, that are not animalistic, that is, that are useless for survival. These needs include the need for companionship, the need for laughter, the need for beauty, the need to know the universe about it. These are the beginning needs. As the incarnations begin to accumulate, further needs are discovered. The need to trade, the need to love, the need to be loved, the need to elevate animalistic behaviors to a more universal perspective. During the first portion of third density cycles, incarnations are automatic and occur rapidly upon the cessation of energy complex of the physical vehicle. There is small need to review or to heal the experiences of the incarnation. As the energy centers begin to be activated to a higher extent, more of the content of experience during incarnation deals with the lessons of love. At some point in third density, the green ray energy center becomes activated, and at that point incarnation ceases to be automatic. Thus the time, as you may understand it, between incarnations is lengthened to give appropriate attention to the review and the healing of experiences of the previous incarnation. Upon our physical death, as we call it, the mind-body-spirit complex is quite intact. The physical body complex you now associate with, the term body being but a manifestation of a more dense and intelligently informed and powerful body complex. In our space-time continuum terms, there is a great loss of the mind complex, due to the fact that much of the activity of a mental nature of which you are aware during the experience of this space-time continuum is as much of a surface illusion as is the chemical body complex. In other terms, nothing whatever of importance is lost, the character or pure distillation of emotions and biases and wisdoms becoming obvious for the first time. These pure emotions and wisdoms and biases being, for the most part, either ignored or underestimated during physical life experience. In terms of the spiritual, this channel is then much opened due to the lack of necessity for the forgetting characteristic of third density. As an entity goes through the death process in the third density, it finds itself in the metaphysical dimension or time/space. Although it is difficult to describe this realm adequately, due to the limitations of our language, we shall try our best. The hallmark of any dimension is the inequity between time and space. In our physical realm, the inequity is won by space. There is an illusion created in which space was a field and time was a river. In the physical realm, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion. In this physical framework, a field or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what we call the speed of light from the direction of superluminal velocities. In the metaphysical realm, the inequity is upon the shoulders of that property known to us as time. And so consequently, in this unseen realm, time is the field and space is the river. This property renders beings and experiences intangible in a relative sense. The bodies have their physicality in an electrical sense rather than in a chemical sense. Thus, the time-space or metaphysical experience is that which is very finely tuned and, although an analog of the physical realm's experience, lacking in its tangible characteristics. This realm is as complex and a complete system of illusions, dances, and patterns as is the physical realm and has as structured a system of natural laws. In these metaphysical planes, there is a great deal of what we call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases and learnings of a prior, as we would call it physical incarnation. The extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated, which must be absorbed before the process of healing of an entity may be accomplished. Each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as we are located in the physical realm, in a somewhat immobile state in time. In this immobile space, the entity has been placed by the form maker body and higher self, so that it may be in the proper configuration for learning that which it has received in the physical incarnation. Depending upon this metaphysical locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. The process involves seeing in full the experience, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, forgiving the self for all missteps as regards the missed guideposts during the incarnation, and finally, the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning. This is done entirely by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in the physical realm of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. The process of the forgiveness and acceptance in the metaphysical realm is much like that in the physical realm, in that the qualities of the process are analogous. On the one hand, The advantage of the metaphysical realm is that of the fluidity of the grand overview. On the other hand, the advantage of the physical realm is that, working in darkness with a tiny candle, one may correct imbalances. However, while in the physical realm, it is not possible to determine the course of events beyond the incarnation, but only to correct present imbalances. In the metaphysical realm, on the other hand, it is not possible to correct any unbalanced actions, but rather to perceive the imbalances and thus forgive the self for that which is. The decisions then are made to set up the possibilities, probabilities of correcting these imbalances in what we call future physical experiences.